morning, everybody. It's great to see everyone here. We've got a lot of meetings and resources and time for the planning this, and it's just so amazing to see this crowd here today. I hope, can you hear me? Yeah, you can. Everybody, please start taking your seats. Hey, Chris, can you hear me back there? Yeah? All right, thank you. All right, we're going to get started with our third panel. My name is Seth Royster. I am a trust and safety attorney here in Alexandria. Again, it's good to see everybody. I am joined today by Sally Hurme to my left. Sally is an elder law attorney and also the author of Wise Moves, which is a book published by the American Bar Association and AARP, and it really is a great resource for those older adults who are looking for information on housing procedures. To my right, very left, is Andrew White. Andrew is the Assistant Vice President with Atlantic Union Financial Consultants. Today we're going to be discussing really financial aspects for seniors and housing. I'm very excited about this panel. As a trust and safety attorney, I get questions all the time from clients about housing issues and planning for it, and then also about finances. And so these two individuals up here with me today they're experts in these fields, and they're going to really provide you all with great information. All that being said, Sally, you're going to be our first speaker.
Okay, very fine. I'm delighted to be able to come back to Alexandria. I practiced law here. I've lived here for 45 years, and so it's all very fun to come back. I do want to talk to you about sort of a wide variety of things that you should think about as you think about where am I going to live, or am I living in the right place right now? So there are, next slide, you have many options, and you need to understand what are the differences between all of the various kinds of ways that I can organize where I'm physically going to live. And there are lots of considerations that you need to think about, and we're going to talk about some of those as we go on. But the basic question is, am I going to stay where I am, or am I going to go someplace else? Well, it's important, next slide, it's important to plan and think about really where do I want to be living during the next 10, 20, 30 years. And it's very important to plan ahead so that decisions don't have to be made in a crisis. But let me tell you about how important not only is it to plan, but to be flexible in those plannings. Well, Alexandria has been my home base for 45 years, and then my husband inherited some money from his family, and so we decided what we need is a second house, a getaway place. We couldn't decide whether we wanted to go to be on the beach or in the mountains, but we went house hunting, exploring around, and we found this absolutely fabulous old stone house near Shepherdstown in West Virginia. It was easy to get to, and we just thought this is where we wanted to have as a second place to live. Well, it also was in pretty bad shape, and it needed a whole lot of work and money. And so, but it still was my absolute getaway every weekend, driving up to West Virginia. But then my husband started to show signs that he was developing dementia. I couldn't do all of the renovations on this house all by myself, and he was not able to help. So we had this second house. This was kind of where we were going to retire to, but it was, as some of you know about old houses, a money pit. So I started thinking, well, this is not going to be the best place for us to live. So my daughter was a school teacher in the Shenandoah Valley, and we decided together as a family that the best thing to do would be for us to buy a house where she was living, and we would have a multi-generational arrangement, because she would be available to help me with my caregiving responsibilities for my husband. And so we found a large farmhouse near Harrisonburg, Virginia. And so we moved from Alexandria, selling our Alexandria house and selling our property in West Virginia to buy a multi-generational home. So my husband and I moved in with my daughter, her husband, her two preteen teenage kids, 4 dogs, a barn full of cats, 100 cows, and we had multi-generational living for a while. But it really wasn't what my husband with advancing dementia, the environment in which he needed to live. It was a little chaotic. It was a whole lot of fun for everybody but him. I did enjoy having the assistance of my daughter in taking care of my husband, but this was not a good plan. So what we did is that we found a very small, one-level cottage, so to speak, in the little town of Bridgewater, which was where my daughter was still living. We were only 10 minutes away from the farm and the chaos, but we had the opportunity for my husband to have a more calm environment where I could still continue to be a 24-hour caregiver for him with his advancing dementia, with the plan that I would keep him at home as long as I physically can. And I still have my daughter and my grandchildren to assist me. And actually, the reason why I'm able to be here is that my daughter is taking care of my husband during my absence. And after I leave here, I will be going to my granddaughter's graduation from high school and celebrating her 18th birthday. So we've had the opportunity of, in my case, plans well thought out, fell apart, but we continue to be able to be flexible, to find the right kind of living environment under my personal family circumstances, my husband and my daughter and her family. So, you've got a plan, you've got to think through, you have to come up with a realization of what are the circumstances, and you have to be flexible in thinking about what are the best housing options that are going to fit my circumstances. So next. So if you're deciding what it is that you're what are the best housing circumstances for me, you really need to think about what do I like about where I am? Do I have the right amount of space? Do I have the right amount of storage? Do I have too much storage because I have too much stuff? What are the family relations that are important to me about where I live, whether it's here or someplace different? Do you like the weather? Do you like the temperature? Do you want to move to someplace where it's warmer or someplace where it's cooler? What do you want about the kind of living community where you can live? And thinking about where you currently are, what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? What would make you happier? What would fit your circumstances better? And then you also have to take into consideration what's going to be the best and what is going to be available if I can't live as independently as I'm living right now. What might be health circumstances coming up in the near or far future for me and the other family members that are involved? What are my mobility issues? How am I doing going up and down stairs? How am I doing getting in and out of the car? What kind of transportation assistance am I going to need to have? What sort of activities do I enjoy doing? One of my primary top of the list things is I've got to be next to outdoors. I'm not on a farm anymore, but I have a garden and I have my flowers, and being outside is probably one of the primary ways that I can keep sane under my current circumstances. So, next slide. Once you put all those considerations, let me give you some of the options. I'm going to give you kind of a bird's eye view of many of the different things that you can think about if you want to do something differently about your living circumstances. Most of us want to age in place. I wanted to stay in my house in Alexandria for the rest of my life. Okay? But is it safe? What about the stairs? Is the kitchen what you need? Are you in utilizing whatever smart technology might be able to help you stay in place? But also think about what happens if I'm going to need some help. What transportation am I going to need? Can I rely on public transportation? If I can't drive, how am I going to get from place to place? My husband, unfortunately, is no longer able to drive, and I am his chauffeur and cab driver. If I need some help as I age in my own home or the place where I currently am, do I need any help with nutrition, getting meals, what assistance might be available? Am I going to need any in-home assistance? Will I need to have some sort of care coming into my house that will allow me to stay in place? There are many options and opportunities. There might be an agency that you could use to help you identify the level of in-home assistance that you might need with housekeeping, with meal preparation, with medical assistance, and the importance of socialization. So, thinking about if I'm going to age in place, what else do I need to think about that is going to make sure that I can safely stay here and get the assistance that I need? My assistance comes through my daughter and my granddaughter. They are the ones who help with transportation. They are the ones who help with nutrition. But I had to move out of my home to get into another living circumstance that would make sure that my husband and I are safe. Next slide. If you want to stay, it's expensive to maintain a house. There are the taxes, the upkeep, the mortgage, and so forth. Many of us are fortunate to have already paid off our mortgage, but still, you may want to think about, is there some way that I can get some financial assistance out of the fact that I am at home and I have my own home? I'm going to give you just top line some ways that you can get money out of your house without selling it that will assist you in paying for the expenses, let's say, of the home health care that you need to enable you to stay at home. There is a legal arrangement called a life estate. And this is, without getting into the complicated legal details, top line, you sell your home to someone else and you still keep the right to live in that house for the rest of your life. Because you can divide the ownership with the right to possess. Ancient legal common law. You contract with the buyer so that they understand they own the house, they pay you a fair price, but you have the legal right to stay there as long as you want. You gain income from the sale of your house, but you can still stay there to give you the money so that you can continue to live at home. It's a little bit more legal complicated than that, but I'm trying to give you just ideas of things that you could possibly explore in the future. Just an example of how it might work. You own the home your house is worth $300,000. You sell it to your child for $150,000, and you get $150,000 cash to keep on staying there. Then, when you die, according to the terms of the life estate, your child now inherits the house that they paid $150,000 for, that's worth the $300,000. So it's a good deal for them if they got $150,000 and they can get the mortgage and so forth. And it's a way for you to obtain some cash. Oh my. Okay, other ways that you can get dollars out of your house. You can, next slide, you can house share by bringing someone else in who is a renter. You can split expenses, they pay you rent, and you get companionship by having someone else living in the house with you. You could consider having your house as a temporary rental, like an Airbnb. A way to get money out of your house. It's complicated, and there are other expenses, but it's something you can do. You also should explore whether there is property tax relief that you can get. I know in Fairfax and in Prince William, as you can get a reduction in your property taxes for your primary residence if you are over 65. Next slide. Another thing you can do, as I did, you can consider living with others, moving out of your home, or having family members move in with you. Multi-generational housing has wonderful benefits as long as you all get together. You can also consider co-housing, which is not, which is another way in which your home is shared. You have your own home, your own private space, but there is common space that others who own their own home in this same area. An example of that is Tacoma Village here and Abington's Elder Spirit. It is a way to own your own property, but have people of similar interests and having common space that you can share. Next slide. There, you need to know that there are what we call age-specific housing options. This could include villages where within a already existing community, people come together to share experiences and pay sometimes a small fee for shared assistance, such as home repair, getting a discount for legal advice, getting a discount for other people to help you with your computer and so forth. But these villages are just sort of like associations of people within the community. One example is At Home in Alexandria. Then there are other kinds of age-specific housing, which we call age-restricted housing, which means that to be able to live in that community, you need to be of a specific age. It doesn't, you still own the property, but you have, there are restrictions on who can live in the area. And many times they have a lot of extra resources, but it's a place where you can live with other older people. Frequently, you have many opportunities for activities, sports, crafts, as well as community. So then sort of the next top level would be assisted living or skilled nursing living. So as you think about your needs and circumstances, recognize that there are many different options and there are many different ways that you can have the kind of living environment that you want. But, as our next speaker is going to explain, it all takes money. So, with that,
Hand it over to Andrew. Sally, thank you so much. And again, I can't stress enough the book Wise Moves that Sally is a co-author on. It really is a fantastic resource for housing. So Andrew, I'll let you take it from there. Andrew's going to be talking about the financial side of aging and just some of the aspects of that.
Morning. So, my name is Andrew White, I'm a financial consultant with Atlantic Union Financial Consultants, powered by Raymond James. We are in a very regulated industry, and so this was a pre-approved bio. I don't just like having my picture up there. So, but speaking of regulations, I do have to read you a quick disclosure. Investment products are not deposits, not FDIC, HUA insured, not insured by the government, not bank guaranteed, subject to risk and neighbor's value. And of course, this is general information, not specific to any individual. So, So now that that's out of the way, I've had a lot of great speakers this morning and a lot of great information I actually learned a good bit, especially with the VA part. And I've worked with people and I've seen a lot of these things and a lot of the situations that have come up with my clients. It's never a comfortable thing to talk about as far as getting older and having to rely on other people and things like that. But there's another key word that's been mentioned several times up here, and that's planning. And so it is definitely better to plan ahead to where you have the flexibility and the means to have control over where you want to be. Okay? And I wear the shoes too. So some part of the 18, I was actually laying in bed one night and I thought something was wrong, like a misprint on a book or something. But yeah, so I was actually worried about blasting everybody. It sounds really, really loud. So this is more comfortable. So. All right, so when it comes down to the options that are available, of course, aging in place, and a lot of people want to live at home. I know I would want to, but as mentioned before, there are modifications that will have to be made to your house. So some things as simple as being able to open doorknobs, changing doorknobs to handles, and you have stairs, all those various things. And of course, that takes money to do so. The other options of continuing care retirement communities, they've kind of talked about as well, and then assisted living facilities. I kind of like to look at this as having options that you have to pay for out of pocket, and then other options that you may be able to fund with other vehicles. And I'll get more into that in a second. So, but there's a line between those two that has to be crossed before those other things will come into play, where they'll pay for things. How many of you know what an ADL is or have heard that term? Okay, so a couple of people. So ADL stands for Activities of Daily Living. And so those are the things that have to be done forgot to set the timer in case somebody's all right. Yeah, so then activities of daily living are eating, bathing, dressing, toileting, transferring, maintaining continence, and of course, memory. And so if you can't do two of those things, that's usually a trigger point for like long-term care policies and things like that to kick in to help pay. And so if we kind of think of that as a line going across, the things above that, when you start to age in place, we start up here because you have to pay for it either out of retirement accounts or savings, some other type of asset out of your pocket because insurance policies will pay for the very beginning of that time period, right? Then you go into the CRCs, you have the obvious cost of putting a large down payment down and then having the monthly costs where you can move into a community to where you don't necessarily need care, but then after you cross that line, they have the care on site and continues. So paying for those two things ahead of time is above the insurance part. Then once we cannot hit or cannot do two of the 6 daily living activities, then we start looking at skilled nursing facilities, memory care, assisted living, and those types of things. And that's where we start getting into ways to pay. Okay, so a lot of my clients choose to self-insure, and you can do so meaning if you have financial planning done and you have the resources to be able to pay out of pocket and pay for your care, you can, you don't necessarily have to have insurance. You can. It allows you to leverage and gives you more power to be able to pay for those things. But you can pay through Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs, there's advantages with health savings accounts, of course, taxable accounts, annuities, and even, like Sally mentioned, using real estate, meaning your house. You can leverage that as well through the ways that she was talking about. The other thing you can do is through risk transference. So that means you take the risk of needing care and try to transfer that risk to the insurance company. And you can do that through a long-term care policy. So traditional long-term care policies are where you take money, you pay a premium, they're usually pretty expensive, right? And unless you have some type of rider or special thing going there, you're just taking the money, putting it out the window. You can do that for 10, 20 years, and then, I don't know, get hit by a bus or something, and it's lost. And so another option would be to look at adding, either using like life insurance or asset-based long-term care. Now, some of the benefits of doing the traditional long-term care would be that they comply with state long-term care partnerships. And what that is where if you have a long-term care policy, the state will allow you to keep a certain level of assets above the Medicaid threshold. Okay, and what that means is, I probably should have put that part first, but I'll kind of go ahead and jump into that now. So as we know, Medicare does not pay for long-term care, right? Except for that first 100 days after a qualifying event. Medicaid will though, but you have to meet specific criteria, and it's very, very stringent. So for example, in Virginia, the asset limitation is around $2,000, and they only let you keep like $40 of income or something like that. And they even have a 5-year look-back rule, so if you go and give away all your assets to your beneficiaries, children, whatever it may be, then they'll adjust when they'll start paying based on how much of those assets, how many months of care those assets would have paid for. And so with the state partnership, what they will do is when the insurance policy qualifies, or qualifying policy pays out, they'll allow you to keep over that $2,000 limit, dollar for dollar in most cases. And traditional long-term care insurance is generally the main one that's qualified for that partnership. And they have specific companies that have been vetted and meet the criteria for that too. And so that's one of the advantages of traditional long-term care. Downside is it's expensive and premiums can increase. You know, so those are things to look at. And you don't necessarily have to get a policy that will pay for everything. You know, we tend to have other money coming in. It's usually just to help offset some of the costs. So, the other two things that you can look at doing are two options, and would be one, life insurance with like a long-term care rider or a chronic illness rider. Those can help offset some of the costs, and they have their own criteria, and those are usually tied to those two ADLs, just like the traditional long-term care insurance. And finally, the asset-based long-term care. And you heard someone mention annuities earlier, and that's one of the forms. So you have life insurance that you can do that with, and then you also have annuities that will do that. It's pretty much you're putting, it used to be where you had to put a large sum of money up front all at once, and then it would pay out a benefit over time if you needed care. The advantage of it is that if something happens to you, or if you never use it, it'll pass on to your heirs. And in a lot of cases with the life insurance, it'll pass on tax-free. And with the annuities, if it is paying for care, it may come out tax-free as well because it's being used for long-term care. Okay. Yeah. All right, some of the advantages of the life insurance asset-based. Of course, we already talked about the tax-free death benefit if you don't use it. With the annuity, tax-deferred growth, and the tax-free used for long-term care. I thought I had another bullet on that, but it's not. So, one of the things that have changed over the years, though, is you no longer, with a lot of companies, you don't necessarily have to put a large upfront payment anymore. So they have different payment options. They have 10 pay. You can do pay to 65, and then they'll tell you what the benefit will be at that point in time in the future. And so one of the things I'll do when I do a full financial plan, because I look at the whole financial picture, and a lot of times I'll find old insurance policies out there. And so that may be a way to kind of help fund long-term care through one of these asset-based things, because you can do what they call a 1035 exchange. And that's where you take an old insurance policy, change it over to a new insurance policy, because life expectancy has gone up, so the premiums may be close to the same or cheaper, or maybe a higher death benefit. But if we take it over and put it into an asset-based long-term care policy, we may be able to use that to leverage and help pay for some of the costs of long-term care. And of course, you always want to keep in mind whether there's a need for insurance, which a lot of times there may not be. You know, when we're younger, raising a family, you know, if something happens to us, we have to continue paying bills, or our spouse may continue paying bills, we have a mortgage that may not be paid off. And so the need for insurance is a lot higher when we're younger. As far as some tax considerations, when we're looking at this, of course, we have the medical expense deductions, so I'm not giving tax advice, and I'm not a tax advisor. However, you know, we have anything above the 7.5% of AGI, when it's spent on medical expenses, if you itemize deductions, that can be deducted from your taxes. And that can be beneficial if you're paying for one of those facilities. And the other thing we can look at too, as far as when you're deciding which account to pay for those expenses. So once you cross that ADL line, so for example, if you're going into an assisted living facility or something like that, and you're paying some of it out of pocket, then we want to look at, well, which one of these, how should I pay for it? If I have a traditional IRA, which is pre-tax, or if I have a Roth, or if I have regular assets, well, which bucket should I pay that out of? And that's something that we look at. Again, it's very specific to the individual, because everybody's situation is a little bit different. And so that's one of the things we take into consideration is, well, if I'm paying it out of a pre-tax, how much expenses do I have, and will I be able to write a lot of that off? You know, for example, if you have a Roth, you may not want to do that. You may want to keep that if you're wanting to leave money behind, because of course that money passes on tax-free. So, and in fact, you can even use Roth conversions to some degree if you have those expenses there, where kind of make adjustments. And that's why I say it's very specific to the individual. But it all starts with planning. So good. All right, so kind of putting it all together, the key thing is starting early and making sure that you do plan. You know, and it's best to sit down with a qualified financial professional. A lot of people do retirement planning, but that is an integral part of the financial plan. So if you don't have that, you should definitely sit down with a financial professional to get that done, someone such as myself. So a couple other things I just kind of want to touch on as I was going and listening to the other speakers. And Seth, just let me know when we're done. Some of the things that I've seen in my practice, I've been doing this for 20 years, or almost 20 years. Prior to that, I was in the Army for 2 years. So I appreciate the veteran, the VA stuff over there. All right, so one thing I see every now and again, I'll get someone that has children and they'll leave all of their IRA to the most responsible child they have. They say, well, I'm gonna leave it all to him or her, and she'll disperse it to the other siblings. And while that's very nice and you know, probably makes that person feel good, what we're not really recognizing is the tax implications of that. And so what happens is that person gets that too, yeah, that can be problematic. So, but when they leave it to her, or to, I said her because it's the most recent situation I have, we had to make adjustments for that because, I mean, now she's responsible for those distributions and paying taxes on it, all those underneath her Social Security. So don't do that. Minors inheriting assets. So they've talked about that on the legal side, but one other thing, case that comes to mind was I had a client that came in and she was the guardian of children whose parents had passed away. They were very young children, but they didn't have a will or anything. It came down to where the kids received the money, but it was placed under the conservatorship or guardianship, whichever it was in the state of Georgia, that they had to keep that money super, super safe. Trying to look out for the best interests of the kids, but I mean, if you have a 3-year-old and they're not getting the money until 18, you know, the savings account or CD that's paying 1 or 2% is probably not the best vehicle for them to have that money. And also the family conversations, that's critical. You know, I think that's already been discussed a lot. The last thing are scams. I see that a lot too, especially with the seniors. My mom fell for a scam. Someone called her from Microsoft. You know, anybody receive those calls? Yeah. So, and she went right in there, you know, didn't talk to my dad. She just went in there, got on the computer. Microsoft will never call you.
And you're right, Joe. I was
Okay.
listening to your story about scams.
Yep. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I just wanted to touch on those couple of points. Oh, one other thing, since I do work for a bank, I do want to put that out there as far as the POAs, because that is very true. We are very strict on that, but there's a reason. You know, because there are a lot of scams and a lot of people coming in trying to take money. We have to be sure that that's the case. So take the advice where they said to go in ahead of time. If you have a POA, go to the bank, go to your brokerage firm, talk with them. With us, with Raymond James, there's another form that has to be filled out along with the POA, and that pretty much covers everything. Last one,
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say on the POA point, and I understand why institutions are that way. I've seen situations where, let's say mom is starting to suffer from incapacity, like dementia, and she's got 2 daughters, and they essentially, when one daughter's not there, the other one comes in, takes mom to get a new POA done. And then 2 months later, the other daughter comes back and does another POA. And so they're basically fighting over control of mom and just taking advantage of the situation. So I certainly understand in that case, the bank, you know, they've got 6 POAs in 12 months. They're like, oh, we're done with this. Yeah, something's going on. And so I certainly understand why financial institutions, you know, they have a guard with regard to that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Last thing, just real quick, when you do the trust, so, well, especially the trust, one thing I say is that the trustees, and so they can act independently or jointly. And so that's something definitely to talk to your attorney about, because I have a client that I have to call him and his brother to be able to make trades and things like that. His brother's fine, but I can never get in touch with him. If I can,
Yeah, that's definitely an estate planning issue. And you see it practically speaking, you know, the 2 trustees have to act together, and you can't find another one, you got a problem. That means trustee can't do his job. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And Sally, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming up here. You want to give away some books? Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. I brought a couple of copies of my book, Wise Moves, that goes into much greater detail of the things that I talked about. So I want to know who here has a birthday today?
Who has a birthday today? Anybody?
Yesterday.
Tomorrow. Who's yesterday's person? In the back? You have one tomorrow.
All right, thank you.